Now there's a series of hoses here. These go in, and then there's a hose down. There's a hose down here that goes to the top of the block / transmission right here. There's a vent hose that routes up and goes into the air box as well. So we're starting to run out of wiring harness connectors here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and mount the headlight assembly, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to mount in and wire in the headlight assembly. And after that, we'll tighten the throttle bodies and we'll put on the air box. Probably make that a second or another video to split this up so they don't get too long. Here we're looking on the side of the frame, and in just underneath this part of the throttle body right here, it's probably really hard to see, but we have a 3mm Allen head socket, and we're going to come in on the right. This is the right hand side, and we're going to insert that in there, and now we can tighten the rubber boot on the throttle body to the intake manifold. You want to snug those up so you don't have any vacuum leaks at all. So we get it finger tight, and then we get our socket here, our ratchet. And we want to snug that up really well. And again, if you look in there, you can see that little Allen head bolt. And then we can jiggle the throttle body, and it should be snug. On the other side, on the left hand side, in the exact same position, you'll find one on the other side. I'm going to only show you the one, but it's the exact same procedure. You go in and you tighten up that Allen head wrench, and we'll get that all tightened in. So we'll get those tightened up, and then I'll show you how we're going to connect the rest of the wiring harness up. I've also mounted the headlight to the front portion of the frame, so then we'll take a look at those wires, get those wires up, and then after that we'll put the air box on and hitch up the appropriate hoses and wiring connectors to the airbox. If you notice, this is the 3 connectors from the right handlebar controls, and you notice there is a gray, a black, and then a small 2-wire black. So when you route these in, don't route them through this hole right here. This is where your airbox inlets go. So what you want to do is you want to route these on top of the radiator and run them in. And then right here on the main wiring harness, if you see my hand here, there's your 3 connectors right here for the right hand control wire connectors. So run them through there and plug those into there, and then that will be the right hand side. On the left hand side, this is the wire right here coming from the handlebar controls, and there's a beige yellowish colored connector here, a white connector here, and then there's a spread black connector here. I'll show you where that goes. And then you have a 3-wire connector here that's covered in a rubber boot. This is the connector to where your headlight connectors go. What you want to do is you want to route this to go in between the forks. Same thing with your wires coming from the headlight. You want to route these in between. And then there's wire connectors. You want to make sure you fasten those wire connectors up to the frame. You don't want those rubbing on the tire. So we'll connect those, and then we'll move up forward and we'll do the headlights in a moment. But I want to show you the P-Air system and how we're going to wire or plumb in the P-Air system, and there's a wire connector for the P-Air system. That is the hose connectors that go to the top of your valve cover. There's some reed valves inside that valve cover, and there's some hosing there, probably for emission purposes, and I'll show you how those hoses and that wire connector go there here in a minute. This is your P-Air system. You notice there's a bracket and there's hooks that go through this valve right here, and we have a little bolt. That bolt bolts in from the bottom of the frame right near where the shaft of the triple clamp goes through, and you have this longer hose goes into the air box. You have a hose connector on the right hand side of the valve cover gasket and on the left hand side of the valve cover gasket. You have a series of clamps that I've cleaned up and painted, so that will mount in on top of the valve cover area and bolt into the top of the frame right here on the bottom. And so we'll go ahead and mount that. I'll show you how we're going to do that. Before we put the air box on, we have to come in and we have to put the throttle cables in, because once the air box is on, we won't be able to get to the throttle cables. And there are 2 throttle cables, so we will get those connected, get those adjusted up, and then this is the last piece here that we'll have to put on. There's a rubber blanket that goes over the top of the valve cover gasket. We'll slide that in underneath the coil wires, the coils, and rest it on top. And then we can go ahead and put the P-Air system on. Do the throttle cables. Before we do that, though, we'll finish up all of the wiring harness with the headlight connectors, the turn signals. We'll get all those wired in, and then I'll show you how in another video how to do the throttle cables and the air box, and wrap up anything pertaining to the fuel system. This is the rubber pad or rubber blanket, whatever you want to call it. This will sit on top of the valve covers, and there are slots here for the coils and some slots to slide things in. So before we put the P-Air system on and the air box, we have to go ahead and put this blanket. Also, I have to check the manual to see if we can. There's a tray, a plastic tray that fits in. I'll have to see if I can mount that in from the front, or I have to mount it in between the frame. We'll have to take a look at the manual to see that. But we'll go ahead and get this on here in a little bit. We're now going to hitch up the remaining portion of the wiring harness. As you notice here, this plastic covered harness assembly has 3 connectors in it, and it goes up to the headlight assembly. There's some aftermarket connectors here for an HID system, high intensity. This is this isn't stock, so I'm not going to say, I can't really say too much about that, because unless you have this, it's not going to really help you. So this was the original connector, and the user, the person I purchased the bike from, went in and cut the black wire on this harness, so it's just going to sit there for now. This connector right here is for your instrument cluster. This connector, which is a 2-pin connector, is for your steering dampener. So those And there's a side light, or I guess you might call them like a running light. There's a connector on the left. There's a bulb right up in here. This is the side light or running light for the left hand side. There's another connector on the right hand side. Here is a bundle that is part of the harness. Since both of these lights are on at the same time, they're not really directional, so one of these connectors plugs into one of the running lights, the other runs into the other light. And then what you have is these two round looking connectors are your turn signal lights. And one is left, of course, and one is right. And how you identify those is you can look at the wire color coding, and by then looking on the wiring diagrams, you can tell which one is the left and which one is the right. And that's pretty much it for the wiring harness. So I'm going to end this video now, and then in the next video we're going to start setting up the air intake or the air box. But before we do that, we have to wire in the throttle cables. So next video we'll do throttle cables. We'll start assembling the air box. We'll put in the rubber mat that I showed you, the P-Air system, and we'll get all that stuff done. So hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.